Hello everybody, this is the 8th video which I'm re-recording, and then I'll be finished all the re-recording and I can go back to making more videos. As it happens, I had a problem with the microphone, and then I got this external microphone which is over here, and it works very well because it's directional. And then what happens is my computer fan switches on like it is now, even though I've tried to switch everything off. And then it causes problems. And also I discovered that even with the microphone plugged in, I still have to set it in the settings and then also in the program, Snagit, which I'm using to record. And as long as I do that and I look at the left screen here and I can look at the microphone, I can see that everything's hunky-dory. Today I'm going to deal with a number of laws, finishing off the laws. We've dealt with the policy. Today we have to start with the NERSA Act, the Cooperatives Act, the Distribution Network Code, the Electricity Supply Bylaw of the City of Cape Town, the DOE, electricity regulations, and then the NRS 097 standard, and then the ISMO bill, and then the Electricity Distributor Standard for Embedded Generation. I'm doing all of these in one video. Video might be a bit longer than normal, and just to get through them all, and just to show you that there's a context for everything. Everything fits into somewhere. And okay, let's look at the laws and then see where we are. Remember, we started with policy. Policy is the government strategy. Law is the government system that allows the policy to be implemented. And then there's translation and commentary. Translation by professionals in industry, and commentary by people like me, active citizens, scientists, business people, and so on. So the first bit of law to look at is the act that created the National Energy Regulator. There was a regulator before this, but this was in 2004, and the act came out in 2005, and it was gazetted in 2005, or that was a 2004 act, and it created the National Energy Regulator. The National Energy Regulator is a body that's meant to live independently between the utility and the consumer, and it's meant to license utilities. It's meant to license anybody who wants to generate and sell more than 1 megawatt of electricity. Anybody under that doesn't need to register or doesn't need to license. There's a new rule that's coming out. It's been on the cards for more than 10 years for everybody to register, but everybody above 1 megawatt needs to get a license. So the registration process is undefined, and as we've seen in the past 10 years, the National Energy Regulator, all they do is they actually just rubber stamp whatever Eskom wants to do. So let's just see what I wrote about that. Is it independent or rubber stamping? If there's only one supplier monopoly and only one buyer monopsony, then NERSA is a scam, in my opinion. According to the grid by Gretchen Bakke, regulators were created by the utilities and not by the governments. Food for thought. So I think that it's important to understand that the utilities created the regulators in the first place, not governments, and therefore regulators work for utilities in general, and therefore we need to look carefully at how we deal with independence and interdependence, and are the regulators looking after the public's interests? Are they looking after the government's interests? Are they looking after the utilities' interests? And the government was elected by the people, therefore the government should represent the people, but unfortunately the government own the utility, and therefore the government owns the utility's profits, and therefore the government's employees can earn whatever they want working for the utility and not necessarily earn what the private sector would pay them. And hence we end up with Eskom being bloated. Even NERSA says it's bloated. Even NERSA says that Eskom is bloated, and we have overpaid employees, where the rumors are that even a sweeper earns 50,000 Rand a month, whereas in a normal business maybe the sweeper earns 5,000 Rand a month. And a top employee could be earning 50,000 Rand a month. So if you're a sweeper and you work for Eskom, you're a top employee. And that's hence why I say that according to the amount of money that Eskom pays its employees, not one employee should be concerned that they may or may not lose their job if Eskom changes its nature and becomes deregulated, and also becomes 3 organizations: generation, distribution, and transmission. The next law we're going to look at is the Cooperatives Act. The reason I put this here is because the National Planning Commission report of 2010 says that cooperatives are a very important part of South Africa, And the Cooperatives Act came out in 2005, and as you can see, it's in multiple languages. And let's just see what I've written here. Cooperatives and body corporates allow people to buy and sell electricity across borders. So it's important to understand that if you have a body corporate in a building, for example, the body corporate, or in a business park, the business park owner can buy electricity centrally and they can distribute it locally. They can also buy and sell electricity locally, legally, and cooperatives can buy and sell electricity locally and legally without doing something called retail wheeling. Retail wheeling is when you wheel electricity across the electrical grid. And there are other grids that have wheeling, for example, the train grids in Europe, where private operators like Virgin run their own trains on the public grid. The airways have public grids. For example, different airlines such as South African Airways, British Airways, Virgin, etc. operate between South Africa and Europe and other countries, and they operate in air lanes where they pay different countries for search and rescue and for radar control and so on. And then there's telephone, which is the biggest network and the most complex network, where public infrastructure providers put in infrastructure, and then smaller independent ISPs, independent service providers, in internet internet service providers buy bandwidth from big public providers and then provide local supply. So the fact that there's an electricity grid which is publicly owned should mean that anybody can supply the grid and anybody can buy from the grid, and therefore these suppliers and buyers can work in a kind of stock exchange system where they actually buy and sell electricity across a public grid. If Eskom can buy and sell electricity with the neighboring countries, why can't neighbors inside South Africa buy and sell electricity from each other? So this is a big question, because on the one hand, Eskom says no one can buy or sell electricity except for them, and on the other hand, they buy and sell electricity with their neighbors. In Cape Town, the city of Cape Town says they can't buy and sell electricity from anywhere, but Cape Town has its own power station, and it in fact used to have a number of power stations, some of which have closed. An oil-burning power station in the harbour is closed, and then the local power station in Milnerton is closed, and then the power station, which is the pump storage scheme at Steenbras, is still open. And then, of course, the city of Cape Town also buys electricity from the Darling wind farm. So there are examples, and there's a lot of mismatch in South African law about what's happening and what's meant to happening. So this is Act number 14 of 2005, and it's the Cooperatives Act. It says, the cooperative values of self-help, self-reliance, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, and social responsibility are recognized. The cooperative movement can play a major role in the economic and social development of the Republic of South Africa, in particular by creating employment, generating income, facilitating broad-based black economic empowerment, and eradicating poverty. There must be these are sustainable economic enterprises that government is committed to providing a supportive legal framework to enable cooperatives to develop and flourish. The importance of this is that cooperatives are a central part of South Africa, and in fact, whether government is supporting them or not, they're happening all over the place. In black and coloured communities, they're called stokvels. A stokvel is an old friendly society, which is how Old Mutual, one of South Africa's biggest companies, started as a friendly society in the 19th century, looking after each other. Let's see what we wrote over here. So, the National Planning Commission, 2010, this sent a false message of hope. This is one of my things that I'm saying, that all these documents, all these policies, all these laws send signals to business people, and in terms of pestle variables, political, environmental, social, technological, industrial, and legal, and variables. It's PESTIL, P-E-S-T-I-L, it's an acronym, you can look it up, and it's taught in business schools, and when you know that something's happening, something's coming, you can prepare for it and be ready for it, but then it didn't happen, and I've asked before, and I asked again, why didn't it happen? Why was it only greenwashing? And what was the government up to? But regardless of anything, regardless of what the government's doing or not doing, one needs to understand that this stuff is happening inside the environment. People are building their own houses, people are making their own electricity, people are collecting their own water. It's all happening. It happens more in townships than in suburbs, although a suburb technically is also a township from a legal point of view. Let's see what else we can see over here. A lot of chapters. All these laws have a lot of chapters. I'm just going to look through my notes here to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. On page 10, let's go to page 10 of the actual document, page 12, purpose of the Act. It says the Act, let's just see where the beginning page is. Chapter 1, purpose of the Act, application of the Act. Okay, let's just go up. Right. So, the Act, preamble, and in order to we've spoken about, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this Act. Okay, let's go to the next law. The next law is called the Distribution Network Code, which was approved in September 2007. It sent signals again that the distribution code would change the market, and yet nothing happened. There were all these sections in the Distribution Network Code, and let's go through the table of contents, the objectives, and importantly, in the scope of the application of this law, which is the 2007 Distribution Network Code. As you can see in the name of the document, embedded generators formed a very important part of this document. Again, we go to page 10, application for connection. How do we connect? Responsibilities of customers and users and so on. Quality of supply. All kinds of rules and regulations. And then we get to this point. Least economic cost criteria for shared network investments. Shared network investments are investments on shared infrastructure, and all shared investments must be justified on least economic cost. In determining the least economic cost for shared network investments, the investment must be justified to minimize the cost to the electricity industry and not just to the distributor. And the thing is, it's not just the cost to the electricity industry, it's also the cost to the consumer. And right now, we know from Medupi and Kusile, all the maintenance happening, not just in South Africa, but also in America and the world, that since 1970, the cost of centralized electricity has been going up and up, and whereas the cost of renewable energy has been going down and down. And like I've said here in notes, Eskom is not the least cost option anymore. There's other options which are cheaper. And according to the rules that, as I understand them, although I'm being challenged by other policymakers, the rules, according to this and other rules, and the City of Cape Town keeps saying they need to buy from the lowest cost provider. At the moment, they're buying from Eskom. Eskom is not the lowest cost provider, and they need to look at what they're doing and what they're saying. Page 13. The embedded generator, Quick pause for a coffee break. The embedded generator shall ensure that the reliability and quality of supply complies with terms of the connection agreement. Now, Eskom is currently outside their license conditions, according to what NERSA told them to do in 2010. They had to complete by 2015. They haven't completed it. It doesn't look like they're going to complete it even by next year, 2020. And technically, in order to meet their license conditions, as set out by NERSA, Eskom will have to switch off a third of their fleet. If this happens, we will have load shedding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And hopefully by then, everybody would have woken up, and people will carry on with embedded generation. As we've seen, there's potentially already 10 gigawatts of embedded generation in the grid, and that will expand and explode quicker, and therefore the reliability and quality of supply will be better. The reliability generally must be better, and the quality of supply, not just in terms of the quality of the frequency and so on from electrical point of view, but the quality in terms of environmental damage and so on. You see what I wrote here? Eskom can't do this anymore. That is correct. Eskom can't do this anymore. Let's go and look at the next document, which is called the City of Cape Town Electricity Supply Agreement. I've got that in a Word document over here. And it talks about someone called the director. So this document comes in April 2008. And these documents are all in order of date order. And it talks about the director. The director means the director of the service provider, and with the City of Cape Town, any person lawfully acting in that capacity, and any employee of the service provider duly authorized hereto by such director or person in so acting. And I just want to scroll through this and show you how many times the word director is used. You can see this is a working document. There's black and green and red and different colors from different people making comments on the document. Here's the word director. Here's the word director. Director, director. 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 Director, director, director. Director, 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 director. Director, director. Director, 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 directors. Director. And then there's more directors. The reason that I've spoken about this, why is director important, is because it's easy to corrupt a single person. If that person's David Lipschitz, sorry, I believe in karma. You can't corrupt me. You can pay me whatever you like. Money is not going to corrupt me. The way that you think is not going to corrupt the way that I think. But the director who allows himself to be corrupted, who doesn't believe in karma, gets corrupted. Whereas all these places where it says the director, if it said the committee, the City of Cape Town Electricity Committee, if you want to corrupt 12 people in a committee or 10 people in a community, it's incredibly difficult. Maybe 3 people, not that difficult. It's easier to give R1 million to one person and corrupt them. It's relatively easier to give R1 million to 3 people. But R1 million to 10 people or 12 people, more difficult. And who knows, it might not be 1 million, it might be 100 million. And suddenly it's 1 billion. It says the consumer to erect and maintain electrical installation. Any electrical installations connected to or to be connected to the main supply, and any additions or alterations thereto, which may be made from time to time, shall be provided and erected and maintained and kept in good order by the consumer at his own expense and in accordance with this bylaw and the regulations. So in other words, the consumer is required to look at this bylaw and make sure that they meet all of the conditions of this bylaw. And one of the things is that in America, there's 3 laws one needs to look at when one builds its own electricity system. Whereas in South Africa, there's about 15 or 20 laws, documents. In America, it's like 1 page. In South Africa, you've got to get an electrical engineer to help you with the installation. And what about the responsibility of the supplier to make sure we don't have load shedding, that the coal supply is clean, that the flue gas desulfurization is happening properly? What about all that? Is it happening? Director, 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 the director, 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 director. This director, I hope he's read this, because he has a big responsibility to make sure firstly that he understands all this, because he's in charge, or she is in charge. So the director has too much direction. The director must not be the person responsible for making the decisions. The director must direct, and the committee must make decisions. Okay, I just needed to wait for the fan to switch off again. Let's go back to law. We're now on the Department of Energy, Electricity Act from 2009, regulations on new generation capacity. Spoke about refit, and the refit was the renewable energy feed-in tariff, which started off as 2 cents per kilowatt hour since 2009, later increased to 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. This tax was meant to pay the refit. And then we need to know, was it ring-fenced? Where is it now? And why hasn't it been paid? And if there's no refit for small-scale embedded generators, then what's the point of paying this tax for more than 10 years? As you know, we have all the preamble, chapter headings, and so on. Regulator, procurement. The minister may determine that the refit program must be used to meet the required new generation capacity. Again, it sends signals to the market saying there's going to be a refit, there's going to be a renewable energy feed-in tariff, and therefore we're all going to be greatly fine because we're going to have a refit program, which never happened. Okay, let's look at the next law, which says I'm not scanning, I'm not putting it online because of copyright law. This is the South African Bureau of Standards, grid interconnection of embedded generation for small-scale generation. And I wasn't allowed to put this online because I had to pay for it. At the bottom here, it says the preview of the standard was downloaded on the 10th of February 2011. This copy is fully protected by national and international copyright law. So it's weird because this document, which forms the basis for the embedded generation, was a hidden document, not allowed to be published, and yet it forms the basis for our embedded generation. And maybe that should have sent a signal to everybody reading this that maybe something else is going on if an important document is not allowed to be published. The next thing we have is the Independent System Market Operator Bill. And the importance of this is that, as you know from today, the government is talking about the ISMO again, and this was in 2011, said that there would be an independent system market operator which would allow Eskom to buy and sell electricity through the operator, and end users would be allowed to buy and sell electricity through the operator. And the government's been talking about it for more than 20 years. We're going to look at commentary from professionals on this very topic. Again, it's an act, it's a law, it's established as the ISMO, but the ISMO was never, although it was established, it was never actuated. And then there's this very important comment here. It talks about the application of the Companies Act. It says the provisions of the Companies Act which are not in conflict with this Act apply to ISMO subject to subsection 2. A provision of the Companies Act will not apply to ISMO in circumstances where any contrary arrangement is provided for in this Act or the Minister of Trade and Industry has issued an exemption under section 8. The Minister may, on recommendation of ISMO, request the Minister of Trade and Industry to exempt ISMO from the whole or part of provision of the Companies Act. Now imagine if I created a law for my business that says David Lipschitz may request the Minister of Trade and Industry to exempt my power station technology Pty Limited from the whole or part of the provision of the Companies Act. If I can motivate it, if I can put it in the Government Gazette, if everybody says, yeah, it's no problem. What's the point of having a Companies Act? What's the point of having law? If one company, one business, one government department can say, well, I'm going to ignore the law because it's not applicable to me. I'll ignore the Constitution, or I'll ignore the Bill of Rights, or I'll ignore broad-based black economic empowerment, or I'll ignore the competition rules because they're not applicable to me. I mean, here's the government saying in a law that the minister can request the other minister to exempt him, to exempt his organization. If the government can exempt itself from its own laws, then why can't anyone do this? What is the point of law? Everybody is equal before the law. That means that government is equal, I'm equal. If I have to obey law, government must obey law. It's as simple as that. And then there's one more, which I'm just going to open now. Which is the distribution standard by Eskom Distribution for embedded generation. Again, this was created in 2011. I can't highlight it because it's secured, can't be modified. Although it was published in 2008 and it was reviewed in 2011, these are the people that were involved in it. Table of contents, blah blah. Development team, all these people involved in developing it. bibliography, sets out the minimum technical and statutory requirements for the connection of embedded generations to the ESCOM distribution medium voltage and high voltage electrical networks. It's important this because it sends signals to the market. It sends signals saying, we're going to allow distributed generation. We're going to allow embedded generation. We've created the laws and the standards and the rules and the policy and the strategy and the money with feed-in tariffs. And we're collecting taxes from people at 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. We're going to allow embedded generators to feed their grid. We're going to allow embedded generators to retail wheel the electricity to other users. And yet they didn't do this. This cost myself and so many other people so much money. I'm still in business. Lots of my friends are not in business. I know so many people I've met over the past 10 or 15 years who've been so excited about being involved in the business, either financially or just because this gives them an opportunity to give back, or it makes an opportunity for them to make the world a better place. And yet, the government didn't do anything. I mean, here at the bottom of the page, there's a distribution policy. Purchasing of energy from embedded distribution generators. There's so much information available. Look at all these acts and laws and standards, international standards. And I mean, this is what an end user like me has to abide by. 1, 2, 3, 4 acts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 South African Bureau of Standards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 international and national standards. And continues ESCOM standards, distribution test and maintenance procedures. What was it all created for? It was all created to actually make it so difficult for an embedded generator to make electricity. In fact, that's not quite true, because the embedded generator, as we saw before, by the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan 2010 updated 2013, as we saw there, whatever the government does or doesn't do, incentives that they put in place or don't put in place, laws that they put in place may be ignored by the end user, by the homeowner, by the business owner, who decides they're going to put in their own generator. And then when they realize it's being used so much, they put in their own PV panels. And when they realize that's being used so much, they put in battery backup. And when they realize that's being used so much, they take themselves off the grid. And when they do that, they defect. And my problem with that is, what I want everybody to contribute to South Africa. I don't want people to defect. I want the end user like me to say to the government, as I've been saying for 15 years, I'm prepared to sell you electricity at 8 o'clock at night. I know how to do that. I can sell you electricity at peak time, when it's costing you 15 Rand a kilowatt hour, and I can sell it to you for 5 Rand a kilowatt hour. And I can buy it back from you at 3 o'clock in the morning when the electricity is cheap. Maybe 20 cents a kilowatt hour, and I can pay you 50 cents a kilowatt hour. I can buy an electric car, which the government makes difficult because there's 45% import duty on electric cars in South Africa, even though we don't have an electric vehicle industry in South Africa. So therefore there's no competition. There's theoretical competition because we have other cars. But there's taxes on those as well. I can take my electric vehicle and go to Century City or a big shopping centre, Cavendish Square, park my car, plug it in at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and buy electricity at cheap rate because they've got time of use tariffs. And maybe they're paying 50 cents and they charge me R1. And then at 6 o'clock they hit peak time when they're paying R2.50. And they buy electricity from me at R2 from my car. And I program my car about how much electricity I'm prepared to sell them. And I make R1 profit by doing that on the energy that I bought and sold while my car was parked in their garage. I might park my car in their garage and leave it there overnight, because it makes sense for me to do that if the shopping centre is just around the corner from me. And then I can collect my car in the morning and commute to work. And maybe what these shopping centres do is they give free parking to anybody who has an electric car that parks their car in their garage overnight. Food for thought. Thank you very much.